Welcome to Still Speak Podcast. As you see by the title, this is another update on Gabby Petito. It is now day 7 since Gabby's mother, Nicole, reported her missing on September 11th. It's been 19 days since her last text was received from her phone, and that was on August 30th. We still don't have any idea if that was indeed Gabby, and that text had said no service in Yosemite when they were supposed to be going to Yellowstone. And it's been 24 days since her mother heard her voice on the 25th of August, and it's been 17 days since Brian returned home on the 1st of September. Gabby's mother reported her missing after several attempts on the 10th of September to get in contact with Brian and then his mother. After she couldn't get in contact with Gabby, she was trying Brian. He wasn't answering, so she then turned to Brian's mother, basically sending a text of like, I'm worried about the kids. I haven't heard from them. Have you? Do you know if they're okay? And Brian's mother did not return a reply to her in any way. So what's said about this is that she was worried about both Brian and Gabby, and yet the Laundrie family does not seem to return that same concern about Gabby being missing and her whereabouts, and not willing to, until last night, to help in any way locate Gabby. Their statements that the lawyers have given on their behalf have been really cold and distancing. Now, you might have just caught when I said last night. Yep, I said last night. This is what happened if you missed it. I followed it for hours until I eventually crashed. What happened was a crowd had formed outside the home of Brian Laundrie's family, and shortly after this, cops had arrived in a minivan about 6:10 p.m., and a tweet was sent out from the Northport police saying they were requested to come there by the Laundries. Police did say, if you recall, that they did see Brian at the home when this case first began. Of course, they didn't speak to him, obviously. When asked 2 days later about his whereabouts, it was said that they knew where he was, but that they didn't want to comment on whether he was at his family home or not. And at first, I thought the Laundries called the police there because of the crowd that was on their property. They were up on their lawn. There was a man out there using a blowhorn to lead chants. So it made sense to me that they would go to the home and go inside the home, which is what the breaking news was. Cops are inside Brian Laundrie's home. Oh my God. And that it made sense to me that they would go in the home to speak with them, since outside had this massive crowd and it wouldn't be safe for them to go out there. So they went inside to get a statement from them. A short time later, though, 2 law enforcement exited the home, and they went inside a Mustang that was parked in the driveway. I'm unsure of whose Mustang it is, but it was a very brief moment where they looked inside the actual car and they looked in the trunk. I think it lasted maybe 10 seconds that they were looking for something. And I thought, maybe Brian's parents asked the police to retrieve something from the car for them, since it was not safe for them to actually leave the home at that moment. Then it became apparent that this was more than that, because they were there for quite a long time for it to be just a disturbance call. It was just too long. It was like, all right, something's up, okay? And then law enforcement emerged again, and this time they retrieved and then brought in brown paper bags, which was very intriguing at the time, but also very unsettling, because those are usually used for some sort of evidence. A cop had spoke at one point asking the crowd to please calm down and to back up, and this is private property and this is a neighborhood, etc. And this cop was asked if the Laundries were now cooperating, and he said that he could not speak to that. After about 2.5 hours, they left the home without saying anything. And as I continued watching the live feed outside the home, news broke within 3 or 4 minutes of them pulling out of the driveway that Brian is quote unquote missing. I like to use the word disappeared. He has disappeared. Brian is nowhere. We don't know where Brian is. Okay? And this was confirmed by his lawyer, who made an advisory post. They were at the home, looking for any evidence to locate Brian, and it seems, because remember, Brian's not a criminal yet, or a suspect yet. He's a regular citizen like you and me. So they have to file reports on him missing like they would do any other person. Cops cannot, be spiteful and say, well, you're not helping us, so we're not going to help you now. I mean, this isn't high school. This isn't a kindergarten classroom. They have to do their job. They have to be professional, and they have to handle it like they would handle any other missing case, regardless of the circumstance. But you can bet that they were very perturbed by the fact that Brian is now nowhere to be found. And, there's one of two things here. They either know where he is or they don't, meaning his parents. I wonder if once I'm not going to use the word missing because he's not missing like Gabby's missing. Let's say we're going to use disappeared. I wonder if once he disappeared, wherever he was staying, wherever he was staying, that his parents knew at that moment that something wasn't right, and decided that they needed to report him missing, or sort of, in a way, turn him over to police as missing, or on the run, or whatever other word we want to use here, as kind of like, this was an alarm for them, is what I'm trying to say. Like, were they going along with his story, supporting him, and then the second he vanished, they're like, oh my God, maybe he really is involved with something here. We have to turn him in to the police and let them know that he's missing. Or is this like they have a sincere concern that their son is missing the way Gabby's missing, which I don't think that's the case personally. And what's really sad about this is that this takes actual attention off of Gabby. Right? Because now everybody's like, oh my God, Brian's missing. Oh my God, he's missing. He's hiding. He vanished. He took off. He ran. He ran. So it's all it's doing is taking that attention off Gabby being missing, which is rather selfish, if you ask me. And some people can look at this and go, well, this is instant karma. Gabby was missing and you guys didn't seem to care, so now he's missing, and why should anybody care? Well, everybody seems to care because it connects back to Gabby. Why did he disappear? I mean, I think we all know why he did, right? We don't want to jump to conclusions. We don't want to assume we know why. But I think we all have a really good idea, okay, of why he did. We had a few other minor updates prior to this development at the house with the law enforcement, and we did hear from a spokesperson from the Northport Police earlier in the day that they do not have Gabby's phone, so this means that the phone was not in the van that they took into custody. Either he has it, Gabby does, or that thing is long gone somewhere in the United States. There was a press conference that was set up from Wyoming at 6 p.m., but last minute it got canceled. Now, there could be other reasons for this, but it was canceled, and in that live feed, while everybody was waiting around and chatting in the forum right there, somebody jumped in and alerted everybody that the cops had just gone inside Brian's home. And, the press conference today was set up out in Wyoming, and Brian's parents' home is in Florida. But it could have been called off because they wanted to first see why the parents wanted to speak to them, right, before addressing the public. They had just got an alert that they wanted to speak to them. So they're like, you know what, call off the press conference, and let's hear what they have to say first before we speak to the public. That makes the most sense to me. And, we now know that what they wanted to speak to them about was the fact that Brian is quote-unquote missing. This is upsetting, to say the least. There are many agencies working on this, and yes, he has his Fifth Amendment right, but I kind of figured that they were watching him, at least from afar, to see if he would maybe leave to return to wherever she is, because sometimes people go back to the scene of a crime, or maybe if she is still out there somewhere and he did leave her, that he would go back to her, right, and lead them to her. So I figured that they were watching him in the event that may happen. We know they did see him at the home when they first made contact with him, like I said. And, 2 days later, they said that they knew where he was. But apparently, somehow, some way, he's now gone. Okay? He is a citizen, so this is complex. In other cases in the past, they have watched persons of interest, and they definitely watch actual suspects. And like I said, the issue here is that he's only a person of interest because he was the last one to see her, and no one knows where she is, and they want to speak to him. They're not wanting to speak to him because of an actual crime at this point. But I'm left bewildered because what sucks here is that he can literally go anywhere, including leaving the country. And I'm seeing people thinking that he may have actually gone to go get her, like as if she's still alive. I don't believe that. I think he would have just told his family that. He wouldn't secretly go do that, and it also doesn't make sense that he would go and do that and drive all the way to wherever she may be when he could have just simply spoken to police. Because what is he going to do? Go find her alive somewhere and then be like, oh, I found her, and then I don't know. I think he could have just told police this is where she is, instead of just vanishing and going to look for her, himself. In my personal opinion, it does not, bode well for the police that he's now, quote unquote, missing. But a Northport, spokesperson called into the live show I was, watching, and this man had been watching, and so he called in to talk, and he was very defensive about people accusing them of dropping the ball or saying that they should have been watching him, etc., claiming that they're busting their asses, and people have no clue what they're talking about, basically was his reply. I'm not saying that they weren't doing their jobs. I think they were, and I think that they got thrown into the national spotlight, and they're doing the best that they can. This is a very special circumstance. She can literally be anywhere, from Florida all the way to California. We have no idea where she is. And so they're having to work and bust their butt, working all these other agencies to figure out and track down and locate her, whether she's alive or dead. So I'm not going to attack them. I just feel that it doesn't really bode well for them that this man who's under such a scrutiny spotlight is now also missing, and we're risking a chance that, you may never, ever get a chance to speak to him now. So it sucks. I think a lot of people felt bummed last night, and I'm a little worried. Not speaking and telling the last time he saw her was suspect. Lawyering up before she was even reported missing was suspect. Coming back with her van, but not her, was suspect. But while a great portion of the world is wondering where she is or is looking for her except him and his parents, taking off is really alarming. Because why? Why did you take off? What are you avoiding? Right? You don't have to speak. You got your lawyer, right? So what are you worried about now? Right? There's got to be a reason. Is it because they took the van in? Is it because they're looking for her? Is because he knows that cops were there, just like we all knew, because the Laundries wanted to speak to them. And in their minds, they were probably thinking, great, they're going to finally talk. They're finally going to help us. They probably were so excited, only to find out that the Laundries were reporting their son as missing. So as I'm sitting here shocked with my mouth dropped, just like, oh my God, I can't believe this story. I can't believe he disappeared. Imagine her parents watching this all unfold. They're probably completely devastated because they probably knew what this means. And I think we all know what it means. I could be wrong, you could be wrong, but I think we all have a hunch here. Northport police said that the parents were helping and cooperating with them to find Brian. That's kind of ironic, considering, they weren't willing to do the same for Gabby, but they're willing to do that for their son. And the story not totally, but I keep thinking of this story every time I'm talking about Gabby's story. And that's the story of Stephanie Parzi of Freehold Township, New Jersey. She was last seen on October 30th, 2019 after leaving her parents' home, and she had went to a relative's home for the night by herself. I believe she was house sitting, and she disappeared. And the investigation led to one of her ex-boyfriends, John, and he was initially a person of interest, and then he was later arrested on unrelated child pornography charges the month after she had been reported missing. And then, unfortunately, what ended up happening, there was a lot of media pressure against him in that area, and he ended up killing himself. He was found dead in his parents' home on November 22nd of 2019, less than a month after Stephanie had went missing. And he had left a suicide note which confirmed his responsibility in her being missing and her being dead. He died, however, never telling where her body was, and she was not located until 2 months later on a side of a major road in New Jersey. And he wrote in his suicide letter that he had had enough and that he could not do life in prison and that this was the only choice. So it has some similarities in the sense that this suspect, John, was not forthcoming. He was very uncooperative. They had to get him into, the jail by getting him on other charges. He ends up getting released. And during this time, this family is frantically searching for their daughter, and he ends up cowardly taking his life because he didn't want to be in prison. And he left this world without telling them where their daughter was, which is just the most horrible thing. Thankfully, 2 young boys were walking to work and they found her body. Sad for them to have to see that, but I'm glad that her family was able to get her and lay her to rest properly. Gabby's case is kind of blowing my mind because I follow true crime, and I've followed for many years, many cases. And this case, for the first time I've seen, it feels like the entire country is following along, or at least they've seen her face or know her name or know the story. And in most cases, the dominant sex following the case is female. But what I'm seeing is a tremendous amount of men who are just as invested in the case of missing Gabby, which is really interesting. It's a unique story, and uniqueness is what gains traction with these stories and what gets the public's attention. Think of Casey Anthony. Hers was because that, she didn't report her daughter missing for a month, and then she lied. Her name should just be lied. And we found out that she had been partying during that month that her daughter was supposedly missing. You have O.J. Simpson. I mean, that's self-explanatory. You have JonBenet Ramsey, because of the pageant aspect of the story and the fact that she was killed in her home around Christmas. And, Chris Watts' story was unique because of the oil tanks. It's not every day you hear of a case where bodies end up in an oil tank. And because Shanann Watts had a steady flow of posts that made it seem like they had this great happy life, when we later learned that there was way more to the story than what was being presented. And Scott Peterson was because she was 8 months pregnant, and it was also around Christmas time, and then of course the affair, which became a huge focus of that story. We had a few other minor updates yesterday, like Brian's sister speaking out with ABC News. She said that Gabby was like a sister to her, and that her children loved her. And that she said, all I want is for her to come home safe and found, and for this to be a big misunderstanding. People thought she said this is a big misunderstanding, but the full sentence in context was that she was saying she wants her safe home, and for this to be all a big misunderstanding. To me, her body posture and expression came across as that, she was nervous, and she seemed very confused about all that has unfolded, and it almost like she was trying to make sense of it, and that she was concerned about what direction this was going. She just had this very uneasy look to her posture, everything. She just looked worried. She does look older than Brian, so I doubt she lives with them. She also has children, and the house is not that large, but for, who knows? For all we know, she tried to convince her parents and have screamed at them to cooperate, and they're still refusing. They may be keeping a distance from her, so that it doesn't get her dragged into this, and so maybe they're, keeping her at arm's length. She said that she had not had a chance to speak to her brother yet, so I think it's possible she was being truthful here, and that it was strategically done like this to keep her from not speaking to him again, so that she doesn't get caught up in this mess. They kind of wanted to keep it close, just the parents and him, and that's it. Cassie came under fire by Joe Petito, Gabby's dad, in an interview with News Nation. He said that the Laundrie family had a warped sense of love. Quote, if that's the family's version of love, to just ignore and not care when someone's gone and people are looking for them and the entire country's looking for them, that explains how we got to where we are today. Because, look at their version of what they call love, unquote. Listen, his daughter's missing, and her parents are aiding Brian and his silence, and her family's suffering, and they're frustrated and they're angry, so I'm not surprised that he was bothered by what she said. To be fair, what can she do? She can't control her parents, and she can't force her brothers to do anything. She also has children, so she can't just leave them to go help search for Gabby. And she did not say that the family loves Gabby. She said that she's like a sister to her, and my children love her. But, Joe Petito has a point, right? And you got to give him that. He has a point. Is this the reason why they are where they are today? Because their sense of love is not the same as what they feel love is. I'm actually going to be out for most of today. I'm quickly recording this. I had a whole thing written last night, and I was going to record, but all this news started to break, and so I had to kind of scratch that because I wanted to watch what was happening, and then I would be able to kind of fix what I had already written. And then I ended up crashing because I was watching for so many hours and never got to do so. I'm headed out now for most of the day, like I said, so I wanted to quickly put this together. If it sounds rushed, that's why. I have somebody waiting on me. I'm going to be following from where I am today, and if there's any more major developments, I will make a video tonight. If not, I'll come back tomorrow with other things that have come up, and we'll have more discussion about the case while we're waiting for either Gabby to be found or Brian. So until next time, I'll see you soon.